When I first came to London, in the gaslit 1890s, the whole murky jungle of streets and houses seemed to teem with suggestions of ghosts and inexplicables. One famous haunted house in the West End was number 50 Berkeley Square, and even in my own memory, sightseers and country cousins frequently found their way to the square to gaze shudderingly at its gaunt and empty front with its sightless windows and rusty iron railings and balustrades. One abominable phantom reigned supreme at number 50. There are several accounts of the appearance of this ghost, known as the Nameless horror of Berkeley Square, and each time it appeared it brought about the death of people who were foolhardy enough to sleep in the haunted room. The most often quoted record of this monster tells of how two sailors found themselves without money or shelter in London one fog-bound and snow-blocked night in the Christmas season. The two half-frozen tares at last wandered into Berkeley Square, and when they saw the "To Let" notice displayed on the unlighted facade of number 50, they decided to break in and spend the night there. Before settling down for the night, they started a fire in the grate with the help of some Venetian blind laths which they found on the bed. They might have been asleep for an hour, for the fire was still flickering when they both awoke, startled by the sound of muffled footsteps which came from the stairs. There was nothing human about those footsteps. The sailors saw something that was not human, not even fur or feather, pass through the door with a sudden smooth motion. They were out of the bed in a split second and dashed towards the window where they had left the only weapon they possessed, a rifle with which one of the sailors had propped open the window. The intruder took up a position with a large, outspread claws between the bed and the door, thus obstructing the sailor's way out down the stairs, but soon it began to move towards them. It crept. It shuffled across the room, making scratching sounds on the bare boards like the sound of terrible claws. As if it had marked down its victim, with formidable speed it leapt towards the sailor, who had grasped the rifle by its barrel, ready to use it as a club. The next moment the sailor had staggered backwards into the window and had broken part of the framework and glass away. This gave the sailor's friend the opportunity to escape. He dashed past the hideous shape, reached the landing, and was halfway down the stairs when he heard his friend utter a succession of ghastly screams. Somehow he made his way down to the front door and fell upon the stone steps in a swoon. It was in this failing state that a patrolling policeman found him. In the yard, the policeman found the other sailor with his neck broken. A few years after this, the incident of horror at number 50, a tenant moved into the sinister building which had stood empty for so many years. The house became the London home of a Mr. Bentley, who came from an old manor house on the Sussex Downs, so that two daughters, one of whom was already engaged, could come out for some weeks. They noted nothing wrong, and then the fiancé of the elder daughter was invited to stay, and so young Captain Kentfield decided to come to number 50. The night before his arrival, a maid was putting his room in order at a very late hour, when the whole house was startled by her loud screams. Servants and members of the Bentley family rushed to the room and found the girl crumpled up on the floor in a complete state of collapse. A cab was called and she was carried down to it and hurried to St. George's Hospital, where she died the following morning without explaining what had happened in the haunted room. "Don't let it touch me," were the only words the nurse and the doctor, listening to her incoherent muttering, could hear as she writhed in half-delirious spasms of terror. Meanwhile, Captain Kentfield had arrived at number 50, and while a room was being made ready for him, he was told how the maid had encountered some unknown terror and had been literally frightened to death. The young officer ridiculed the ideas of this gross nonsense and was sure that the girl had been seized with a heart attack of some sort. Downstairs, Mr. Bentley, a doctor, who was a guest, and other members of the family gathered together round the dining room fire, for they decided they could not sleep until they were certain that all was well with Captain Kentfield. A few minutes after midnight, there came a violent volley of ringing from one of the bells in the hall. Before the bell had even ceased to vibrate on its coiled spring, There came the sharp report of a fire alarm. Mr. Bentley and the doctor raced up to the haunted room and burst open the door. The young officer was sprawled on the floor with some of the bedclothes clutched in his fingers. An army pistol lay beside his hand. His staring eyes were glazed with the fixity of death, and the terror written in them was beyond expression in mere words. The doctor bent over the sprawling form, making a quick examination. Servants and others who had followed on his heels looked for a moment into the young officer's face and withdrew shuddering to the other side of the room. "He was scared to death," said Mr. Bentley. "Look at these eyes, for pity's sake. Cover his face with a sheet. What kind of fear on earth could turn a man's face into such a frightful mask of fear?" The doctor was quite unprofessionally shocked. "No fear on earth," he said, speaking quickly and thickly. "I can tell you what I think, but not now."